Well, welcome again to another episode of Chris McDaniel's America here on the Midnight Ride Network. As always, I'm Chris McDaniel. With me also Jack Fairchilds. Jack, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Chris.
You know, it's been a terrifying week when you think about it. Starts the week with a solar eclipse and everybody basically goes berserk. And then every news article I read is talking about the apocalypse and even a warning that the entire social order could collapse, whatever that is. I think we probably lost the social order a long, long time ago. But none of that is as terrifying as Washington, D.C. And it goes back to what I said last episode is we get so distracted. You know, we get distracted chasing things. Pleasure, sometimes. We get distracted chasing stories. We get distracted just chasing the news because the news is absolutely terrifying. Of course, it almost never comes to fruition. They say these things, it's very dramatic. Even the weather reports nowadays, if you notice that when there's a storm system coming, it's like this massive Arctic wave. They don't just call it rain anymore. Everything is meant to be sensationalized. And so here we are, once again distracted. Meanwhile, we're losing the country while Washington continues to be completely dysfunctional. So today, a whole bunch of things I want to talk about. The first is why it is that primaries are so important. The second is Trump has taken a stance on abortion. We'll talk about that. And we'll also talk about why it is the Supreme Court isn't a political body. And the term conservative versus liberal doesn't necessarily apply to Supreme Court justices. We'll discuss that. Also, another fascinating thing in the middle of all this turmoil, Democrats, do they have a moral compass? And I'm concerned about it because it seems like everything that was once considered good is now considered bad. Everything once considered bad is now considered good. They can't even agree on how we combat terrorism. It's like they forgot about what happened to Israel. They forgot about all those Americans that were killed and kidnapped. I don't understand this party. They're so concerned about finding oppression they forget that the people of Israel are probably the most oppressed people on the planet. And even now, I'm seeing stories indicating that perhaps at the Democrat convention this year, there's going to be a massive split because so many of those people seem to support Hamas, the Palestinian cause, whatever that is. They can't define it. They don't know what the Palestinian cause is. They just know it's cool, right? Yeah. And we'll go over that as well. And then I want to talk about Israel's security because I think if we can't help provide some security there, it may break up traditional alliances that we need there in this very unstable Middle East. So with all that being said, let's go back to topic one, Washington, D.C., and why primaries are so important. We sometimes get caught up in this fight. R versus D, blue versus red. And the belief system is that somewhere along the way, we've got to win general elections. And that is true. It always helps to outnumber the other side. But at what cost? And what do those numbers look like if we elect a bunch of numbers but no principled conservative fighters? And that's the issue right now. Here are a couple of examples. Primaries. Take Mississippi. Take Alabama. Texas. There are a lot of states that are just red states. And in those red states, you would think we would owe it to ourselves to elect the most red politician imaginable, the most conservative politician imaginable. Consider Bernie Sanders, an avowed socialist. He gets elected.
Yeah.
You see, they got the memo. The wackadoos out west, the senators from California, both radical leftist, right?
Yes.
Think about it. Blue states elect true believers. Red states, for some reason, don't. The Democrats have figured it out. Primaries, that's where the game is. You win primaries, you win those races, and you advance to higher levels of government. Here's another example. New York State. Take New York State, for example. Is a Republican going to win a U.S. Senate seat from New York State?
Most likely not.
No, he's not. He's not. It's the same way out west in California, a Republican. And look, Steve Garvey's running right now, a guy I happen to like an awful lot.
Yeah.
And he's not. Well, I hope you do, Steve. Chances are it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and he's a former Dodger.
And the reason I say all that is this, is that it's difficult for Republicans to hold these positions. And so naturally the Democrats recognize that, and they give us the most liberal of liberals. Mm-hmm. And that most liberal of liberals prevails, and it pulls the country to the left. Whereas in Mississippi, people say we're a staunchly red, a staunchly conservative state. Consider our two U.S. senators, hardly conservatives. Okay, we'll get into that in a second. I see somebody rolling their eyes out there. Just because you say prayers don't make you a conservative. Just because you're pro-life doesn't make you a conservative. There's a whole other body of work out there that needs to be done, accomplished, before you can claim the mantle of conservatism. So take Mississippi, take Texas, take these other red states. If we're going to be successful in pulling Washington back to the right, we should be electing conservatives in these positions of authority. At least Texas gave us Ted Cruz. But that's only one of two. At least Kentucky gave us Rand Paul, but that's one of two. We ought to be winning primaries, and that's where we're messing up. If we run strong conservatives in primaries in states where we know the Republican's going to win no matter what, then ultimately conservatives will prevail in that election. But the establishment uses our fears against us. What do they say? Well, that candidate's too radical to get elected. Really? Really? In states like Mississippi and Alabama, and Florida now even, a plus 20 Republican red state, DeSantis has been pretty far to the right, and he's leading the charge there. So we can't fall for the establishment wing of the party. They failed us every single time. Every example they give is about perpetual failure. Every example they give is not about advancing the conservative cause. It's about advancing their personal careers. They're making big bucks, they're getting big perks, and they don't want you to upset the apple cart. And if that means watching the Democrats pull this country to the left and destroy it while they stay in their country clubs, having a good time, they're okay with that. They don't dare fight. They wouldn't dare push back, because to push back means they may lose their buddies in the establishment. If you lose the McConnells of the world, how do you raise money? Meanwhile, the Democrats are fighting. They're fighting like the country's at stake, and that's why they're winning. We're fighting like we're at a country club having dinner. And that's why we're losing. It's the most frustrating thing in the world. So how does this keep happening? It starts locally. And you and I talked about this the other day. You had a couple of complaints about things locally where the party apparatus truly is. And even statewide, how the party apparatus handles conservative candidates. And it seems to me that many of which are just rubber stamping whatever they're told to rubber stamp. And if you continue to rubber stamp, you continue to get the exact same nonsense you've gotten over the last 40 years. I've never understood. You keep doing the same thing over and over and over, and you get exactly the same results. And then these same people sit at these meetings, whether it's the county executive committee or whether it's the state executive committee. And they sit at the meetings and they complain about how things are. But the second an incumbent comes down, it all changes. And they don't ask the right questions. They don't fight the right ways. They're there to protect the incumbent class. Why is that? Let's talk about that. Maybe it's because they want something too. Maybe it's because everybody is so concerned about climbing up that ladder, about feeling important, about feeling prestigious, they wouldn't dare do anything where they could possibly lose their seat at the table. The table is worthless. The table means nothing. If you hold a seat at the table and the country fails, you still have a failed country. Something else I've never understood about holding a seat at the table. What does it get you? You get to beg for crumbs? You get to beg for a cracker here and there, and sometimes they'll throw it to you and tell you to hush up and keep your opinions to yourself. What good is that? If you're going to save this party, if you're going to save this country, you can't just ask for a seat at the table. You got to turn the table over, and you got to replace it with people that really will fight for a living. You touched on that this weekend because you had some frustrations. And I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, again, no point in getting personal to anybody or anything, but I think the feelings you have are generally felt by a whole bunch of conservatives out there.
Yeah, and I'll talk to that. You know, this past weekend was the county conventions, you know, all throughout the state of Mississippi, and I'm sure in other states as well, they had their county conventions. Starts early in the morning where you go to the precinct you vote at, and you become a precinct delegate to the county convention, and from there you elect the next executive committee and the delegates to go to the state convention. I've done this since 2008, Chris. Yeah. You know that. You're one of the ones who was instrumental in getting me involved. I've done it since 2008. And Saturday morning, I got up. I still went to my precinct. I was the only one there, so that meant I could have been the delegate. I could have gone to the county convention. I decided not to because since my time serving on the executive committee, my time serving and going, I've been a delegate to the state convention 3 times, and I just don't see a point any longer.
Let's sum it all up. You've been an active part of the party apparatus for some time. Yeah. You have been a delegate to the convention statewide. You've been a part of the executive committee here locally. And now, ultimately, what I'm hearing is you've lost hope.
I have.
Okay. Now, there's the problem. And it's not your fault. It's not your fault, because a party apparatus that doesn't hold officials accountable isn't a party apparatus at all. I've never understood the idea of being a member of a club that had no values, a member of a club that had no purpose. I mean, sure, you've got an R by it, and that's cute, and you go to these parties and everybody's wearing red, and I love that. I love the Republican Party. But if you're not willing to actually take a risk by sticking your neck out there and holding politicians accountable, it begs the question, what's the point of the organization? Now, the answer is this. If you're not holding them accountable, you're perpetuating their fraud.
Exactly.
If you're not holding them accountable, you're perpetuating their power structure and their power base. Now you know why it is we feel powerless. It is not these people are bad people. I don't mean to imply that. Some of the best people I've ever met serve in the Republican Party on Republican executive committees.
100% agree.
And it's not their fault. It's not their fault. There's something going on higher up. There's some kind of control being enacted or exerted where they don't feel comfortable speaking their minds. I want to see them comfortable speaking their minds. And if that means criticism to a U.S. senator, if that means criticism to a governor, whoever, then they have to take it and be critical. The idea that you can't be critical to an office holder is antithetical to everything we've ever seen in the American experiment. The whole point is criticism, and they have to be thick enough, their skin has to be thick enough to handle that criticism. We're not here to protect those people. Gosh, we don't have leaders in this country, Jack.
No.
We have representatives.
Exactly.
We are the leaders. We don't follow these people perpetually because they happen to get elected. They're knuckleheads. They're supposed to be listening to us, not the other way around. But they're not. And so we have an apparatus, not just saying here locally, because I'm saying these are some of the finest people I've ever known in some of these communities, but it begins on the statewide level. And they create this cocoon of yes men on the statewide level. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And that cocoon is there specifically to protect the power class. And so when somebody reasonable runs against the power class, they find their lives ripped apart and crushed. And that happens every time we try something. But it's not just here. It's not just here.
Yeah.
That's a nationwide phenomenon. How else could you explain why these people keep getting elected at 99% election rate when the country is so upset? Well, there's your answer. And we fall for it time and time and time again. Now, going back to Mississippi's two senators, specifically Roger Wicker, who just faced a primary race.
Yeah, I had two opponents.
You know, here's the thing. Roger Wicker's a nice guy. I've known him for a long time, and he's very pleasant. And I have no doubt that he's a good Christian man. I think he actually has a well-intentioned behavior about him. But, you know, I'm taking a step further. If you see the whole apparatus burning down, and I mean that metaphorically, the country's in trouble, I'm not so sure I want somebody my papaw knew they were fishing buddies, and that was his only criteria for being elected.
Yeah.
I mean, I know he's a nice guy, but can't we find nice guys that are actually uber conservative? I mean, Rand Paul's a nice guy. He'd be great here. Ted Cruz is a nice guy. He'd be great here. Yeah. Can't we find those people? But it seems, again, there's this reluctance to actually find someone that will fight. Now, here's why. Again, if they fight, they're ostracized. If they fight, they're criticized. If they fight, they lose their seat at the table, and they want to sit there so badly they'll do anything to maintain those positions. And here we are, doing the same thing over and over and over again. This is not a bash Roger Wicker hour by any stretch of the imagination, but when you have a conservative scorecard, system-wide, as low as his is, from a state that's supposed to be the most conservative state in the country, there's a disconnect. Something's just not working. And we're not against him. All we're asking him to do is to actually come back to the right. That's accountability. And that's what the party should be providing. It shouldn't be us at a podcast. Our party should demand that he hold up the core tenets of the party. Not to bring home the bacon, not to come give nice speeches. We're all pro-life. I get that, Roger. We're all pro-life. What are you doing fiscally? What are you doing to change the direction of this government in Washington, D.C.? And the answer is nothing.
Well, Chris, you're summing up exactly my frustration because, again, and this isn't meant to be personal against any of those politicians or any of that, but when they're not upholding the party platform, which I encourage you to go read the Republican platform because it's a wonderful platform. But they're not following that, not just in Mississippi, but throughout this country. They are not following the platform. And when you go to certain meetings and get told that you can't call out this particular guest because, well, they're a guest of ours, I don't care. The reason they're there in the first place, Chris, in my opinion, is to answer for their bad votes, and they don't want us calling them out.
The one thing politicians decry the most is accountability.
Mm-hmm.
They have this reptilian brains, and all they really want is to be petted and told they're doing a good job. But when they feel any bit of pain, they react negatively.
Yeah.
Well, they've forgotten their place. They've forgotten their place. They're not to go up there and do whatever they want. They're supposed to do what we ask them to do, and our platform means something. So you run under the Republican moniker, and then you get up there and you abandon it, and then you're rewarded by perpetual reelection for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It makes no sense whatsoever, but it goes to show people just aren't paying attention. Until we find a way to hold politicians accountable, we're going to keep losing. There's another way we should be looking at this too. What about those that just don't take any positions?
Yeah.
Let's talk about this. This is going to step on some toes, but we need to step on some toes.
Let's do it.
We have Republican statewide office holders right now in Mississippi that are so concerned about running for the next office, they wouldn't dare take a position that could offend anybody.
That's true.
They would rather watch, as long as they hold power, as long as they keep that measly position, or for that matter, try to advance, they'll let the whole thing burn down so long as they can manage its decline.
Yep.
Take Medicaid expansion, the most anti-Republican thing imaginable. We have a Republican lieutenant governor, a Republican Speaker of the House pushing it, and all the other statewides, not a word.
It's crazy.
They're jockeying. They're not even concerned. Why not take a position? I don't care what your position is. If you're an elected Republican official, shouldn't you stick your neck out there and say, this is absurd, Delbert Hosemann?
Yes.
But again, they're so concerned about losing their seat at the table, they can't even hold anyone accountable. They're all posturing for the next 4 years. They're all getting ready to run. They don't want to say anything that could offend somebody. So again, we see early voting passed. That's a Democratic big talking point. We see Medicaid expansion passed. Another big talking point for the Democrats. Meanwhile, everybody's dead silent because they don't want to offend anybody. The whole point of this is to hold somebody accountable. The whole point of this is to offend whoever you have to offend to turn this thing around. But they're not doing a thing, and that's the condition that creates a rot in our party. Where are the conservatives? Why aren't you speaking out about Medicaid expansion?
They fear leadership more than they fear any backlash from the people, and that's sad because and it's in large part the fault of those of us, the voters, because we haven't made them pay when they have turned their back on us.
They're told by their operatives, don't take this position. It could be offensive.
Yep.
Wait your turn.
Yep.
Okay, so when they do finally get their turn, they're still controlled by the same operatives. They won't change the theme because they don't have quite the courage to stick their necks out there and say, this is wrong. And if you can't do it on Medicaid expansion, I don't know what you can do it on.
I don't either, Chris. And you're summing up Medicaid expansion. I'll be honest with you. That's a big reason why I didn't want to be involved in Republican politics. Am I still a Republican? Yes, because what's the other option? There's not really one. But do I want to be actively involved in what I consider now to be a farce? Because that's what the Republican Party is currently.
Well, the sins of the party are through omission and commission. Omission by not taking action to hold people accountable. Commission by allowing them to act. And just ignore the platform. I'm going back to Reagan's idea here. You know, he said we were a party of bold colors, not pastels. But so everybody's so busy running for office, they wouldn't dare offend anybody. Meanwhile, the country falls to pieces, and they think they can fix it 4, 8, 12 years from now. At what point is it too late? I mean, if you keep watching this decline, listen, believe it or not, folks, now I'm getting, this is a national show, but I'm talking about Mississippi. We have a supermajority legislature, House, Senate, all these Republicans. Philosophically speaking, policy speaking, the Democrats are steering the ship.
They are.
They're steering the ship. Now, that can happen here. What about your states? And that's the problem. We got to turn the tide where we can turn the tide, and that's why primaries are so important. Couple of more things. I saw today this issue of abortion. It seems to never go away, and that's probably a good reason for that. It creates a lot of tension and hostility for both sides. And President Trump now has been asked about his position on abortion.
Yes.
And A lot of folks are mad at his answer, including Mike Pence. Mike Pence
and Lindsey Graham.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Lindsey Graham.
Yep.
Lindsey Graham, another rhino. And I'm not calling Pence a rhino. I don't know what Pence is. He seems to fluctuate, but I'm trying to figure him out as we speak. But now, Trump's stance. He says that his stance was a slap in the face to supporters. Now, what did Trump exactly say? He said that states should chart their own path in regards to abortion. That's a constitutional answer.
I agree with that answer.
I mean, Trump has not always gotten this right. And I've told you before, this is not going to be the place we defend people blindly. Yeah. When he was up in New York before he ran, he was very pro-choice. And there's a video of him saying he's pro-choice.
Yeah.
So he's seen the light. We're proud of that.
Yes.
But his answer here is absolutely dead on from a constitutional perspective. Now,
Correct.
I realize that people think that we should ban abortion nationally or using the federal government to do so, but that's not the role or purpose of the federal government. Now, if you want to go through all the hard work of amending the Constitution, certainly you may, but the issue of abortion is silent in our Constitution. Because it's silent in the Constitution, that belongs to the states by definition. What Trump said is accurate. You may not like it. Mm-hmm. You may wish you could, change the law and force everybody to do your bidding and your will. You may want to be a tyrant for conservatism, whatever the case may be. Yeah. But his answer at least was consistent with constitutional principles. And it got me to thinking about all that. I mean, why don't we try to jettison the document when it's good for us? And then when the Democrats do the same thing, we get mad at them.
Yeah.
It's not a national issue. And until you amend the Constitution, by definition, it cannot be a national issue. It's the same with the Democrats. If they tried to pass a law nationally that overrode the will of all the states, you should be just as offended.
Yeah.
The whole point of this is that the states have to have the control. Now, with that said, Trump was right, and Pence is mad, and there are some national conservative groups that are mad, but we need to remind ourselves, why are we here if not to conserve early American principles of federalism being a part of that? And we don't override those things when it's convenient. We have to respect the states to make these decisions. Now, I don't like it any more than the next person likes it, abortion on demand. Yeah. But California has to make that call for themselves.
We have to be consistent.
We have to be consistent. But likewise, California, if Mississippi goes the other direction, you have to respect our wishes as well. They have to be consistent. I don't like this federalizing of every issue. Our job is not to control Democrats. Our job is to handle our business and respect the Constitution. Their job is not to control us. It's to handle their business and respect the Constitution. It just seems we always ignore it when it's convenient. And that's a problem. So Trump says this should be a matter of states' rights, and he's absolutely accurate. Now, I wish he would have said it better. He basically couched it in political language, like, we need to do this to win votes. No, just say it.
Yeah.
Just say, look, this is the constitutional approach to this issue, as with almost all issues. Mm-hmm. Those issues belong to the states.
And it's funny to watch Pence and watch Graham. Did you see Lindsey Graham's comment on this?
I can't imagine. What did he have to say?
He said that the pro-life movement has always been about the well-being of the unborn child, not geography.
Couldn't you make that argument about every liberal nonsensical policy they've passed in the last 75 years?
You could.
Once again, it goes to show Lindsey hasn't read the Constitution. Yeah. And it's the darndest thing in the world, these men that take an oath.
Yeah, to the Constitution.
To uphold it, and then ignore the plain language of it because it suits their political needs. He's a loud, screaming, soft-hearted, bless his soul kind of guy, and he says these things because he knows it'll get press, and he knows people will see it, and they'll see him as pro-life. Lindsey handles South Carolina.
You forgot, too, he's also now officially a one-time Rhino of the Week, a courtesy of the Chris McDaniel Rhino.
He may get a call back.
I think that's why I said one time. I don't think it'll be his last time.
So look, let's just go over this real quickly for people who don't know. Trump, I think, answered the question correctly, constitutionally. If you want to amend it and give that power to the feds, fine. Until that amendment is passed, you don't have any constitutional authority to ban it.
I agree.
That's a state's issue. Now get this. This is where Lindsey and they all have it so wrong. Roe versus Wade essentially codified federal control over the issue.
Yes.
Think about that. 1973, and the court literally writes law into the statutory books, basically. They create a trimester system, and they write all this stuff under what's called substantive due process. And all of a sudden we have this right that was formed, I guess, out of nowhere. And the questions were, even for legal scholars that are liberal, they said, how did you get to this conclusion? And there was no clear consensus. Law review articles from Harvard, Yale, and others criticized it. These are liberals criticizing the Roe decision based on its logic. They liked the conclusion. They didn't like the logic of it. And so here's what it did. It basically said, states, you have no control in this area for most of that trimester system. We will claim the control as the federal government. Well, abortion is not in the Constitution. The feds have no power whatsoever over that issue. They made a big mistake there. When Roe was reversed, the decision didn't say abortion was illegal. It said the framework created by Roe is improper and that the states have to make those decisions. I, for the life of me, don't understand why the American left wouldn't applaud that. It's a consistent philosophical condition. It gives these states freedom to make their calls as they see fit based on discussions at their state capitals. That's all that Trump was saying. Now, Roe was an anomaly legally because it created this right out of thin air, and they did something called substantive due process to create this right. Now, here's the way it works, folks. If you have a fundamental right that's at stake, fundamental right, keep that word in mind, the government can't abridge it. They can't stop it, so to speak. Fundamental rights clearly are the right to speak your mind.
Yeah.
Right. The right to worship. We'll get into that in a second. That's another story. The right to worship, the right to assemble. Certain fundamental rights are just listed there in the first 10 amendments.
Yes.
The right to bear arms. It's
For
listed
good reason.
For good reason. So we have these fundamental rights listed. So the argument is, okay, what about the rights that are not listed? Are they not fundamental? Because the Ninth Amendment speaks to that. And the answer is, yes, there are other rights that aren't mentioned, but the rights are deeply rooted in the nation's history and conditions, in the nation's history and traditions, I should say. Abortion was outlawed at the time of the 14th Amendment's passage in almost every state, so it can't be said that that particular act was rooted in the nation's history and traditions. Yeah. The left ignored that test for the time being, and they just created the so-called right of privacy, and they claim that encompassed this right of privacy. There is no general right to privacy in the Constitution, so the court took it upon themselves to create this new right out of thin air. All Trump did, all the Dobbs decision did, was to go back to the original understanding of how these issues are supposed to be decided. Now, it's controversial. People get mad. People get angry. I get it. But that's exactly why we have a democratic process in the state capitals, as opposed to Supreme Court justices making this call. This is why it's important. I'm saying too much today. It's going to get me outlawed.
No, you're doing great.
This is why it's important, okay? You consider that no one would seriously debate the prospect that the state of Alabama or the state of Massachusetts doesn't have the power to protect life.
Yeah.
Life. It does. We do it every day. If someone tries to rob you, we protect your property. If someone tries to kill you, we protect your life. States have that power. Liberals agree, conservatives agree. So the only real issue to be decided for the conservative standpoint and the liberal standpoint on the issue of abortion is, when does life begin? Now, that's a complicated question. I think I know the answer, but it's a complicated question. Questions that are that complicated factually, medically, legally, are best decided locally. You can't have a one-size-fits-all approach because the people of California are going to think life is created at a different time spot than the people of Mississippi. So you allow the states to debate the question of when is a life alive. And at the point they create that number or that date or that time, whether it's conception or whether it's 6 weeks, at that stage, that state and its people have decided what they think is the creation of life. The founders were brilliant, recognizing that each state would probably come up with a different solution, not just on the issue of abortion, but 1,000 different issues. And that's the beauty of the system. Let Pennsylvania be Pennsylvania. They're different people. Let the people of Massachusetts do their thing. They have nothing in common with us down here, whether that's good or bad. But that's the beauty of the system. Experimentation, 50 states, letting them make those calls, and it's the greatest system ever devised if we'll just live by it. Look, stop fighting over Washington. Send the powers back to the states and let's decide these issues locally. And now all of a sudden, liberals, you don't have to worry about President Trump so much.
Amen.
And conversely, we don't have to worry about Joe Biden so much. You know, the senile guy that's trying to run the country.
Don't insult senile people.
Well, Roe versus Wade was not nearly as complex as people make it out to be. It really boils down to a shift of judicial philosophy, which is my last point here. We make a mistake of claiming there's a conservative court and a liberal court. Now, those terms fit, but conservative legally and judicially is different than conservative politically, okay? Justice Scalia was a conservative jurist, and he probably was a conservative political-minded voter. Those are two different things. I'll give you an example. Justice Scalia applied a method of interpretation called originalism. What that does, basically, it tries to look at the words of the document, the Constitution, and it tries to give them defining characteristics based on when they were written, as they were understood when the amendment was adopted. Pretty wise, because by constraining himself to the words and by the intent at the present time it was adopted, it takes away his power to change the ruling based on what he believes the ruling should be. He's handicapped. He's handcuffed to the words. That's a brilliant Constitution. It's a Constitution that we recognize is the preeminent law of our land, so it has to have meaning. Those words have to have meaning, right? Yeah. And so instead of letting liberals look at the meaning and change it based on these evolving natures of time, right? Yeah. You don't do that. You go back to the original time, you interpret it, and you apply it. That's what Scalia did. Sometimes it created a result he didn't like politically. Yeah. But judicially, he felt compelled. That's the genius. So these liberals say, well, it's all conservative court. No, it's not a politically conservative court. It's how you interpret the document. And the American left would have us believe that the document is subject to any interpretation whenever a judge sees fit. Well, you can just throw the words out. You can take an eraser to it and erase words to it, maybe a whiteout. Yeah. Because that's what the American left desires. Now, if you can do that and let judges do it, that's not very democratic, is it?
Not at all.
And yet the American left always tells us they're looking, this is the democracy, we have to preserve it. They're the ones that haven't preserved it because the very nature of the Supreme Court ruling is by definition anti-democratic, right?
It is.
So they go this route the whole time, making the same mistakes we sometimes do. As long as they got the conclusions they wanted, they didn't care how the Constitution was abused. Now, conservative jurists go back and recognize that, and they say, look, the only way to have a real Constitution is to have something you can't erase, have something you can't black line, you can't yellow line, whatever the case may be, red line. And it creates a Constitution that's predictable and understandable, right? They get this. What about these people that say, well, the Constitution is so behind the times, it's so antiquated? It's been amended a whole bunch, folks.
It really has.
And if you're so inclined to amend it again, we have a process for it. In fact, there are two different processes for it. And if you believe that the document is antiquated, and you believe that the language is old, amend it, right? Yeah. And let's move forward with a new language. That's democracy. That's the way it's supposed to work. That's not the way they want to amend it because they know they can't pass their nonsense. They want courts to draft it and rewrite it. That's called an open-ended living Constitution. That's the distinction. Liberal members of the court believe in an open-ended living Constitution where they can claim to know what it means at all times and then change it as they see fit. Conservative means look at the words, look at the intent, and apply it. That's not political. That's the way we read documents. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
All right. Which side of that would you be on?
I'm on the side that the Constitution, the words mean something. This is not a document that is going to constantly change. It is not a document that, as the left loves to label it, a living document. That's the term they like to use. So that way they can constantly pervert the language to whatever they think it needs to be.
It was always such a strange term because there's something really cool about people say it's a living document. I mean, I was in law school. I heard that for the first time in law school, and I thought,
really?
Well, think about it. How amazing. It's a living document. It sounds so fabulous. Scalia came to speak to my class, and I had lunch with him. His words were, that document is dead, dead, dead. He didn't mean it didn't have life. Yeah. It meant that it's subject to the words. And if it's not...
That's the way it should be.
Well, if it's not, what do you have?
Nothing.
How do you have a foundational system of law that's subject to judicial interpretation without the democratic process playing a role? That's anti-American.
It's dangerous, is what it is. It's very dangerous.
I don't want to be ruled by a king. I don't want to be ruled by non-lawyers wearing black robes.
Me either.
And so bring those powers back down to the states and quit making the mistake of claiming one side's all conservative, one side's all liberal. It's much more complex.
Absolutely.
Than that. Now, with that said, speaking of complexities, don't we have a sponsor to thank, don't we?
We do, and I want to point out to you, because you talked about how every state is different, and that we all have our differences when it comes to each other. Like California is going to govern the way California is going to govern. Mississippi's going to govern the way that Mississippi's going to govern. But one thing we all have in common is we all want a good night's sleep, right, Chris?
That sounds wonderful.
You like that segue?
I like it. Do it.
So we all want a good night's sleep, and I don't think you can find a better night's sleep than utilizing MyPillow. And of course, our good friends at MyPillow, if you go to mypillow.com/midnightride or go to mypillow.com and enter the promo code Midnight Ride, you can receive up to 80% off on select merchandise there on mypillow.com.
Very nice.
That includes pillows, coffee, comforters. I mean, it's a whole lot of stuff. They've got more than just the pillow. But Chris, I've been enjoying MyPillow since they gave me one, and it's really a fantastic sleep.
Do you feel rested?
I do. It's got to be the conforming feels. It's got to be.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think it's a wonderful product.
Oh yeah, you've used yours.
Yes, and I encourage. My son likes it too as well.
Oh, so yours got repurposed, is what you're telling me.
It's about to be repurposed a second time because I'm gonna take this thing back. It's just a matter of time. But he loves it, and it really is a nice product. And I encourage people to go, and I think that it'd be good for Mike, Lindale. It'd be good for us if you go put that code in and get up to 80% off.
Up to.
And if you don't get up to 80, Jack will pay the difference between whatever.
No, I am not. That is not something that has been. I agreed to the rhino mask, but I have not agreed to that.
If you didn't see the episode last week, we have a segment at the end where we have the Rhino of the Week, and I think it's called Chris McDaniel Rhino Hunter.
Okay, Chris McDaniel's
and
Rhino Hunter.
We have big plans for this, but I think the most grand plan we've got is Jack in a full rhino mask.
I am told there has been one ordered.
Well, thank goodness.
It's going to save the show, the rhino mask.
Finally get some ratings for a change. All it takes is a rhino mask.
But I think it's just covering my face. I think that's
it's all upside. If it's covering your face, it's all upside.
Exactly. That's how I see it.
I see it as a win-win. I wonder, I'm curious, have you studied how what kind of noises rhinos make? If we got right down to it, could you do it?
I'm going to have to look into it. I think until I can go full method actor, I'm going to have the rhino mask in my possession. Until that happens, I can't go method actor.
I see. So
I think folks are now starting to rethink the idea behind our show.
So if you can't do Anthony Hopkins as a rhino, it's not going to work out.
It's true.
Or Heath Ledger as a rhino.
It's true. I mean, you gotta go method, right? That's what they tell you.
It is fascinating. These guys will live in the character. My mind has escaped me. I got so fired up about the Supreme Court, which is only something a nerd like me could get fired up about.
No, I'm a nerd with you then.
But there's an actor, Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yes.
He's one of the greatest actors of our time, and he's a method actor.
Yes.
And I've heard some pretty fascinating stories about him because the method actors, people don't realize, they literally live and breathe as the character they're portraying. And they do it for a long, long period of time, and they become, in so many ways, that character. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard a fascinating, now we're doing the Joe Rogan hour.
we have switched gears a little bit.
I don't know if this is true or not, but I saw a story one time where he was a stage actor over in England before he transitioned to the big screen.
Yes.
And they were doing Hamlet one night. And they said the appearance of the ghost in Hamlet felt so real to him that he basically became comatose on stage and had to be replaced by his second. So to show you how real you have to play this rhino part, you have to live it and breathe it.
Yeah.
We want a Daniel Day-Lewis performance here, and if something weird happens, it just happens.
It's the way it's got to be.
Well, the point is, as I continue, he actually filmed in a bunch of great movies. I love Gangs of New York. If you haven't seen that, it's just absolutely. He plays Bill the Butcher, doesn't he?
He does. It's a great movie.
And apparently, he played another. His very last role on the big screen, he was playing a fellow. His last big role on the big screen, he was playing a suit maker or a dressmaker in London.
That's right.
Remember?
That's right.
And evidently, he fell into the role so much that he became very, very depressed. And ultimately, he said he would never act again.
And he hasn't.
I think he's a genius. I don't know what his beliefs are politically, but that doesn't change anything. You can still be a liberal. I still think if you're a good actor, there's some degree of genius there.
Before you switch gears back to serious stuff, if you haven't heard Dave Chappelle describe what it was like to see Jim Carrey being a method actor when he was playing Andy Kaufman, I strongly recommend it because he basically said that he had admired Kerry and finally got to meet him. But when he got to the set, he was told he had to refer to him as Andy, and he didn't want to meet Andy. And of course, at the end of it, he makes the joke, said, "Well, that's how I feel when I see trans people," which I thought was hilarious.
Oh, wow, that was terrible.
My delivery's bad. My delivery's bad.
No,
his was great.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm glad you brought that up. That's all upside for the show. Speaking of that, did you see the Pope? The Vatican issued some outlines.
I did.
On gender theory, and clearly they don't subscribe to Biden's approach on gender theory.
Or should anyone?
Well, it's really unusual because Biden says he's a practicing Catholic, and I believe he probably is, but he doesn't act like it all the time. I think part of that is because he has to pacify this very vocal part of the American left. He realizes he's in a tight race right now, so he's kind of like, how do I keep these folks with me and not offend them? And so he has subscribed again. He's doubled down on this gender theory, which in short just believes you can choose to be whatever you want to be.
Yeah.
To heck with the biology, to heck with the science. It's a matter of choice. I'm not sure that's going to work out for a lot of people, particularly in professional sports. Dawn Staley, the coach for South Carolina, took a position over the last few days, and she seemed to say that if somebody wanted to choose to be a man or choose to be a woman and play college basketball, they could. It's a terrible answer because the right-sized guy out there would decimate her poor team.
Can we get that guy from Purdue to go back and play for Iowa and rematch that game with him on the court, pretending to be a woman?
Look, a 7'4" man dressed as a woman. Hey, I mean, who's going to stop that guy?
He
weighs 300 pounds, right? I think even liberals must at least confess the genetic, physical differences between men and women. But now Joe Biden can't even say it. It goes to show how trapped he is right now in this liberal universe. He has to understand that you simply boxing.
Yeah.
I mean, do we really want to see men and women boxing?
No, we don't.
Why?
Because the man's going to – a man shouldn't hit a woman. Well, I mean, first off.
Well, fair enough. I mean, why, though? What's the practical effect of – say they're both equally trained, then say they're both the same weight. What's going to happen, you suppose?
The man is going to be more physical. He's going to have the advantages.
He has the natural advantages. And it seems that even Joe Biden can't concede that now. That's a strange place for a president to be. Surely he's not that obtuse on this issue. Does he really think that that sports and things of this nature should be that open to interpretation? I would think not. I think he's just trying to pacify a very vocal group out there. But what's strange is he not concerned about perhaps offending a whole bunch of good Catholics?
Apparently not. And sadly, when it comes to the American left, it doesn't – religion and that type of stuff, they tend to departmentalize it in a way that I don't think they should, because instead of saying, okay, you're going against my religion, it's almost like their party, like their liberalism is a stronger religion than whatever their true faith is.
Well, I think that there's common scenarios. I think in some respects, liberalism, applied the way they apply it, has a very spiritual nature to it. I think it gives these young people a sense of a definition, a sense of purpose. And it's a sense of purpose that they, for whatever reason, are lacking. Maybe they grew up in tough households. Maybe they grew up in impoverished conditions, but they're trying to find a sense of purpose. And where they once found it in more traditional religion, they now find it in these various fights. And I'm going to talk about this the next show because it really leads, that same concept leads to this whole fight between Israel and Hamas right now.
Yeah.
I am perplexed why it is the American left can't seem to recognize good versus evil. Those poor Americans that were kidnapped and killed over there, those poor Israelis that were kidnapped and killed over there. And I'll get to this the next show. I got to get to the rhino of the day, but just consider a couple of small examples here. Remember the pictures of the event that the Israelis were enjoying when they were raided? Yes. It was a dance, right? Mm-hmm. By very definition, the dance and the dress and the way they were behaving, these are westernized concepts. The women were allowed to dress the way they want to dress, which is a good thing. They were allowed to experiment the way they want to experiment, which is a good thing. It's a Western form of civilization where we recognize individual rights and autonomy. Hamas, on the other hand, they don't recognize any of that. And the great part of the Middle Eastern world doesn't either, despite there's some good ones, I suppose, but they don't recognize the same Western traditions and civilization, the same individual autonomy that we do. So even that small example of watching the Israelis allow the stance, allow the freedom, allow people to experiment and be who they want to be, and then watching Hamas rush across the border and kill them. Meanwhile, while they're creating atrocities to their people over there.
Yeah.
Let's go. You think women have rights in that part of the world?
Yeah.
No, come on.
They don't.
No, the answer is they don't. Not the same rights Americans do or Israelis do. But the liberals now are so lost on the issue, they're just following the order or following this religious nonsense they typically believe in. The people of Israel are the most oppressed people on the planet. And they're going through a very difficult time because they're facing an enemy that seeks their annihilation. Let's not forget that. It's not like, I guess liberals think they can have a pajama party and everything's going to be okay over there. We'll bring some pizza in and go to a coffee and have some coffee. We'll talk it out with Hamas. Hamas is not in a position to talk to you. They've already told you what their goal is. It's the annihilation of Israel from the map. Now, how are you supposed to work with those people? Do they think you could just, a treaty? They've had multiple treaties.
Yeah.
If the goal of Hamas and a large percentage of radicalized Muslims is the elimination of the Israeli state, Israel has every right to defend itself. And if that means marching into Gaza and causing collateral damage, that's called war.
Exactly.
The Democrats can't seem to recognize that. It's the darndest thing I've ever seen. And yet it's the young ones too, especially.
Yeah.
The polls show that the younger they are, the dumber they are on Middle Eastern policies. And I can't understand that. Is the universities just not teaching this?
I think they're teaching the exact opposite. I think they're trying to teach. And Chris, I've got a question for you out of this because this really is perplexing when you look at this entire anomaly. Because again, you're talking about the American left that claims that they want to support all these rights. They want to support this. They want to support that. They claim they're pro-woman. Yet here they are in a region of the world where they're anti-woman. They're anti-everything that the left claims that they need to be fighting for, yet they fight for those very people every time. Why is that?
It's very unusual. It typically, in my mind, it turns their whole logic upside down. It
does.
If you're going to defend the oppressed, I can't think of a better people to defend than Israelis.
I agree.
If you're going to defend those that are literally facing extinction, I think you should defend the Israelis. I'm not suggesting American troop involvement. I would never do that. Yeah. But I am suggesting, Joe, quit condemning the Prime Minister of Israel because you disagree with his methods. He has a country to save, and you are not helping.
I don't think he cares what Joe thinks either. Do you?
I don't think he cares. I would hope not. But he cares what we think because he needs our assistance. And the people of Israel, God bless them, they're going through some very difficult times. Now, with that said, we'll save that. I wanted to save that. There's a whole bunch more I want to discuss for the next show. But the rhino of the day, Chris McDaniel's Rhino Hunter episode. Mm-hmm. Jack, without the rhino mask, but it's coming, is none other than our friend Mitt Romney. Same person, different hairstyle. Mitt Romney. Let's talk about Mitt Romney just for a second. Here's a guy, again, by all accounts, is kind, polite, family man, handsome, articulate, brilliant, and wealthy.
Yeah.
He's had it. I mean, if you can do it, Mitt Romney's done it. But he can't be a Republican for some reason.
That's fair.
And it really is another disconnect because what we're looking for is someone like him that will hold the mantle high and actually be a strong conservative. He's never been that person. He gravitates and he moves and he fluctuates and he does whatever it takes to maintain power. He's the quintessential guy that was more concerned about elevating his own status than he was about holding the line. And when he was governor of Massachusetts, he would have been over backwards to satisfy the left. Not because he believed it. He wanted to hold power. Yeah. But the right thing to do is to stand by your beliefs every time. He has not done that. Now, let's remember, too, there's a lot of reasons people think that Mitt Romney is a rhino. He voted to convict Trump.
Yes.
Right. That alone probably doesn't make him a rhino, but it certainly waves a red flag that a rhino could be near, doesn't it? He's publicly criticized Trump on several occasions. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, public criticism of an official doesn't necessarily equate to being a rhino, but I never hear him ever criticizing Barack Obama. I've never heard him once criticizing Joe Biden. It's strange that he saves his poison for Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. That's odd to me. He's had ample opportunity to attack. I think he and Obama are very close philosophically, probably.
Well, he is the architect of Obamacare with his Romney Care in Massachusetts.
I was getting to that. People don't realize that when he implemented healthcare reform up there, that is exactly the plan that Obama used to implement for the country. Very, very similar, and exactly. There were changes in the legislative process, but It was very, very similar. And yet there's nothing about that fits the Republican mold. He has crossed ways with us every chance he's gotten and still managed to get the nomination one year and still managed to blow it.
Yeah.
I've often wondered, you see Trump ignited this fury across this country of motivated voters.
Yeah.
Why didn't Mitt try?
He didn't because Obama, as you pointed out a second ago, is his buddy, so he didn't really want to go all in against Obama.
It seems to me if there's a story over the last 25 years when it comes to presidential races, the answer is push hard to the right and motivate the base and have them deliver victories.
Yes.
Every other time we've tried it, we've reached, we really haven't had a lot of success. Immigration, he was all for the, the Deferred Action for Childhood stuff. He was all for comprehensive reform. Gun control, he's been open to that concept. I just wish somebody would actually read the Second Amendment for a change. It's not a question of what you think should happen. It's not a question of what you wish would happen. It's a question of what you're allowed to do under the law. And the Second Amendment is very, very clear about what you're allowed to do under the law. This is a non-starter.
Yeah.
But here he is, a Republican, a rhino, and all of a sudden you think that he's open for gun control. Even voting rights and things of that nature, bipartisan cooperation with Democrats. He's always been willing to reach across the aisle and to assist them, but never that I remember him reaching across the aisle to assist the far right or conservatives for that matter. Which, by the way, while I'm on this, the misnomer, the far right, I'm not sure what that means.
I'm not either.
I see CNN use it, but they never say far left.
No, why would they?
I mean, apparently in politics, there's the left, there's the right, then there's the far right.
Is there the right, or is it always the far right? I'm not sure.
I think it's semantics, but it's a very clever way for them to paint people as extremist. And yet we go back to the original point of this show. What is extreme about fundamental liberties? What is extreme about individual autonomy? What is extreme about letting people live their lives? What is extreme about wanting to be left alone? What's extreme with me wanting to keep more of my money? What's extreme about me wanting to educate my kids the way I want to educate my kids? These are elements of extremism. This is American common sense. It only becomes extreme when they disagree. And then the press, their friends, they paint all of us as these far right people. I don't see anything at all extreme about what I just proposed.
There's nothing extreme about what you proposed.
I am proposing a live and let live form of government. That's what I'm proposing. And now that makes me extreme.
Oh, you're just a bad guy. You're a bad guy. Mitt Romney would not approve of you. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Mitt Romney has probably come out and campaigned against you in the past.
Well, yeah, he did. I mean, he actually did.
I know.
Not that I'm holding a grudge or anything.
I think you would have lost my vote if he had come out and endorsed you, though. So I think that was a positive, at least in a lot of our eyes.
There was a time period there. I'm pretty sure they burned me an effigy up there a couple of times. I can just see them dancing around a straw man on fire.
They had a voodoo doll. I think that explains why you're having certain pain issues now.
It worked. It worked. All of their cruelty. It works. It turns out they won the battle so far.
they definitely did.
We're getting there. One of the other things I was researching, and people don't like the idea that Romney talks about character, integrity, and principles in politics. I don't have a problem with that. I think the key there is I don't like politicians being too judgmental. This is gonna rub folks the wrong way on both sides. I mean, one of the cornerstones of Christianity is the recognition that we're all flawed.
Yes.
And we're all sinners, and that for the death and resurrection of Jesus, that we're all destined for hell.
Yes.
When you understand things from that standpoint, you begin to see that it's not really wise for politicians to judge too harshly. It's not really wise for the left to judge too harshly. That at some point, if they want to try to convince us that they're right, fine, we'll listen. But do it in a way that's at least respectful of our ability to decide what's right for us and ourselves and our families. It's the same with the American right. I keep seeing these authoritarian impulses on the right. I saw somebody say the other day that Islam should be banned in this country. No, it shouldn't. I mean, we may not like it, we may disagree with it, but freedom of conscience is one of the basic American principles. It's the whole purpose of the founding. You can't go around banning ideas because you may find them disagreeable. Yeah. So you have these impulses on both sides. All we're proposing, live and let live. And in this day and age, that makes us the extremist.
It's crazy.
There you have it, folks. Another episode of Chris McDaniel's America. again, entertaining, I think. We had a good time. Got a little fired up.
No rhino mask yet, though. No rhino mask yet.
No, we're saving that. I guess it's coming in, right?
That's what I'm told. It is on order and on its way. And speaking of order, don't forget, go to mypillow.com
That's right.
/themidnightride. Save up to 80% off. Get you a MyPillow tonight so you can sleep as well as we are sleeping now.
Outstanding. All right, Jack. Good show. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for being here. This is Chris McDaniel's America. We'll see you next time.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The MyPillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, MyPillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took MyPillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented MyPillow to bring you the best pillow in history, MyPillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that MyPillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. MyPillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of MyPillow.
The MyPillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last MyPillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. MyPillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new MyPillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit MyPillow.com.